Let me do a screen share here and ask you all, if you would, consider going online to our book raffle. We hope to be able to announce a winner at the end of the class here before 12:45. And hop on to give your email at www.lcdworkshop.com. That's learningclusterdesignworkshop.com. And we'll be giving away a free book. Um, I can tell you my co-author, Crystal Kadaki, and I have been immersed in how do we design for modern learning for about the last 5 years. And during that time, we've really run into a lot of wonderful designers like yourself and have pulled together so many of their ideas and their concepts to continue to evolve the model that we've created. So I'm hoping for me to get from you some additional learning so that we can continue to evolve our designing for modern learning model, which we call learning cluster design. Now, I was a big proponent of ISPI, have been a big proponent since the early 1990s. And I've been a proponent because ISPI's conferences, books, materials, all of that has helped to make me a better instructional designer. And I'm happy to be here to kind of pay it back just a little bit. So I really appreciate that. If you want to know more about me, look me up on LinkedIn. Not worth talking about now. I'd rather talk about you and what you are going into. And I can tell you that I don't need to tell you that the world has changed this last year. It's been quite radical. And many of our readers of our book, Designing for Modern Learning, have told us that this book came just in time because when they were pressured to make changes, they could go to the book and it helped them to create a new strategy to address what they're facing today. And that's wonderful. And we are so thankful for them and for the learnings that they're sharing back with us. I hope that some of you will be in that group of sharing your learnings back with us. Um, some people ask, why another model? I mean, don't we have enough already? Now, I'm gonna get to that in just a sec. And oh, by the way, I'd love to see you guys' faces because being a social person, I love to be able to see interactions. If you can't, if you're in the middle of lunch, I understand. But if you can turn on your video, it would be awesome. But again, why another model? I'll explain that in a minute. But first, I'm going to show you what this model is very briefly. The model learning cluster design model is comprised of 5 actions that are best done by learning and development people. Very briefly, we focus on change on the job behavior, learn learner to learner differences, upgrade the existing training that we have so we can kind of pick the low-hanging fruit and get a really quick, great, fast start. And the biggest component of our model is this surround learners with meaningful learning assets, and then track the transformation of everyone's results. Now, quick little tip. This does spell out the mnemonic cluster. Change, learn, upgrade, surround, and track. Now, that's the order that we prefer people do these actions in, but we found that our users tend to take their own approach, and there are a number of common ways to do it. So don't feel like you have to follow the cluster mnemonic start to finish in a linear fashion at all. All of the different actions feed upon each other and build up to a final learning cluster. Now, so why another model when we've got so many good ones? What we found is that all of our existing models have pretty much been created in the 60s, 70s, long before digital learning really came about. And we've listed our favorite ones here. We found that in order to bring us up to the digital age, we needed a unifying model, an integrating model. a model that takes all of what we do and ratchets it up to the digital modern age. So here's just a few of ours that are all compatible with Learning Cluster Design Model, the LCD model. Take a look for your favorite. We actually had Ms. Kirkpatrick take a look at our model as she was reviewing our book. And she says, wait. My model also fits in on this action, not just the 2 or 3 that you gave me. It fits in with this 4th one too. Please add it in the book. And so we did. So these are the 2 challenges I have for you today as I explain a little bit more about the model. 1, please type into chat what your favorite instructional design model is. So type that into chat, and I'm going to ask you at the end of my very brief explanation of the LCD model, if you can find a way that your favorite model integrates into the LCD model, either by feeding into what the LCD model is, or the LCD model would feed into your model to begin another part of the process of designing training. So the second challenge is that I'd like you to listen as you go through this model, as I walk you through it, and think about, is there an issue you have or a problem you need to solve that this model would help you solve? So those are the 2 things. How does your favorite ID model fit? And how will this model help you solve something back at the office, whether it's a home office or a work office? So with that, I'm going to go into what is different about the learning cluster design model. If we start with the surround action, the surround action goes beyond one and done. You notice I talk about meaningful learning assets, S, plural. We're not talking about designing a single program, one and done. If you look at all of our existing ID models, the majority of them are asking us to design one program, one course. We need to get beyond that one and done, because learning sciences tells us one and done doesn't work. And we all know that. We keep trying to add in different layers. We've tried blended learning, we've tried other things, and we're still not quite there. What we want to do is surround people with learning assets. So what is a learning asset? A learning asset can be as large as a 2-day class, a 6-week program, a 6-month program, or as small as a 30-second video, 2-minute video, a 1-pager, a meeting with a different person. It can be any range of things that have been designed to help people learn. So that's a learning asset. And we want to surround people with those things to help them learn. But the purpose of surrounding them is not just to meet the end of the use objectives, the end of the class, the end of the course. It's to change on the job behavior. And that's different, because I've always felt as an instructional designer, the only thing I could control was what's in class, what's in the course. That's what I could measure. So I always went for the learning objectives. By the end of this class, you will be able to, but that doesn't keep me relevant to the business. What the business needs is, can I change on the job behavior? But I'm sorry, the business isn't in the learning business, and so they don't know how to ask for us to change on the job behavior. All they know how to ask is, can you give me another training program? And then they wish and hope that behavior will change on the job. I believe our learning and design organizations can go beyond that, and we can actually change on the job behavior and take responsibility for that. It's a big ask, but it's doable with this model. Now, we also focus on different learner contexts. It isn't a one target audience. You know how we all get that one target audience and we describe it, and that's what all our learners have in common, and we hand that off to the ID folks and say, design for this kind of person. Well, there are nuances within these groups. And if we can tease out 2 or 3 different learner personas,
Mm.
that are the ones that are more likely to change the business metrics if they change their on the job behavior. Then let's focus on providing those people with the learning assets they need to be able to deliver on the job. Now, the other thing we do is that with this whole group of learning assets, we're now able to track what is the impact of this learning cluster rather than tracking what this one course did to change business results. Excuse me. And so, if you think about it, we're always trying to get ROI on a single course. Wouldn't it be easier to put out a group of things, a cluster, a learning cluster, and then say, hey, what has this learning cluster done to help change the on the job behavior and the business metrics? That's what's different about this model from the other models. So, with that, let me give you an example. If we step into the shoes of our modern learners and say, okay, if you're going to learn, how might you want to learn today, given all the tech we have, all the availability? What might we want to do? Well, my co-author, my wonderful co-author, Crystal Kadakia, had just that experience. She was going to France and she was giving a conference there and said, hey, let's take a vacation. Her sister and her mom were coming along, and Crystal, as the eldest child, said, oh no, if I'm taking everyone, I've got to be responsible for them. I better learn French so I can take care of them. So she set out to figure out how to learn French. Here's what she did. She got a couple apps. Surprise! She got these apps and started going through earning badges, doing the various games, going through all the various pieces. And that was great, but she felt like she was missing some of the fundamental structure. And she was struggling to make sure she did enough each day to really get it done. So she said, got to add something. So she added an online Learn French in 5 days, which is great. And in about 2 weeks, she'd gotten through 3 days of that material. It was a little bit overwhelming. So she was improving, but she felt like, oh, time's coming close. I've got to get some more. So she started practicing on her husband. Now, he wasn't going, he doesn't know French. He didn't understand what she was saying in French, but hey, do guys understand what women say? No, I didn't say that. So she started practicing on him so she could learn to vocalize out loud. And she started putting index cards all over the house so she could practice in her situation, in her day to day living. So she was practicing at home, but she felt she needed even more than that. She needed help. She decided she needed a little bit more social interaction with others and help from others. So she had joined the Atlanta French learning meetup group. And that made an even bigger difference. So now she's ready for the trip. But even as she's on the trip, learning didn't stop. Every time she walked into a restaurant, a bakery, whatever it was, she was interacting with French people who spoke French, and she was learning more and more as she went. So the learning continued, and she got better and better. But there were those trouble spots, and when those trouble spots came up, she had two things handy for her. She had Rick Steves' French book, and she had the Google translation. And she had to have both because when there wasn't very good internet connectivity, she had to have the book, and she could use both back and forth. So what she had inadvertently done is created a learning cluster. Um, and I can tell you, this looks very different than how we would typically design training and learning for our people in the workplace. I think you'd all agree with that. This isn't what we typically design. But why not? Why aren't we designing like this for our learners? So I would recommend we do design learning clusters. But what is a learning cluster? Let me give you a brief overview. It's a set of organized, intentionally selected learning assets, small ones to large ones, put together in and out of the flow of work, supporting when, where, and how our learners want and need to learn. And It's focused on the job performance as the ultimate goal. Here's the kicker on this one. It's focused on what we call 3 learning touch points, which are how learners want to learn. A social element, something that involves people, even if it's, not face to face, at least there's a chat or there's a comment or something with people involved. There's a formal element. When I say formal, I mean something that is a start, a stop, and if you finish it, maybe you'll get a certificate or a badge. You don't have to, but you could. So there's a formal element. There's also an immediate element, something that I or the learner can do immediately on their own, independently, whenever they want. That is the definition of a learning cluster. So what we have found is that with learning clusters, we can be more relevant to the business because we are focused on the job performance. Even though that's not what our leaders asked for, they asked us for a training. We're focused on the job performance. This SFI approach, social, formal, and immediate, gives us a way, along with our understanding of learner personas, to strategically select what kind of technologies are we going to use to help our learners learn. It's got to be matched to the learner need and matched to the way people want to learn, social, formal, and immediate. And a learning cluster goes beyond by including the learning sciences that we understand of going beyond one and done. And we're even going beyond blended learning. So this is an ongoing thing beyond blended learning. So with that very brief discussion of something I've written the entire book on, I'd like to get on to your challenges and then your questions. So what were your takeaways? First, in chat, do you think your favorite model can be integrated into the learning cluster design model, either as something that feeds into it or the learning cluster design model feeds into yours? Yes or no? And two, what 1 or 2 things intrigue you enough to try the learning cluster design model or apply it to a challenge you're facing? So let me give you a few minutes to do that, and I will be reading your comments and turn it back over to Kathy to lead the Q&A as I read through your answers. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, and there's a few here that I see. Just as people start entering, I see the LCD model, SAM, Merrill's first principles of instructions. I've said I'm getting more interested in design thinking. Vince has RAD, the rapid application development instructional systems design. On the fly, ADDIE, backwards design model, love that one. Producing impact with learning. Let's see. Loving the cluster concept, which is good.
There's a question about, will the slides be provided? And yes, I believe Kathy or Millar has the PowerPoint or the PDF of this, so that will be provided later.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There were a few in there, Lisa. Or any in there that you wanted to comment on? Backwards model.
I love it. I'm not seeing anything that surprises me, which is great. So let me go on to make sure you've got your book raffle email in there, if you would. And with that, I think we're ready for Q&A.
So please enter questions or comments into chat. Lisa, I just want to start off with one here. And you somebody had mentioned it too, getting HR to buy in, right? And so how do you get leaders to buy into this approach? I mean, how do you get them to, go do a program on this? Because if they could have a magic wand, they would. Their next best thing is, give me a 3-day training on X. So how do you get them to buy into this approach? What's the best way to explain it to leaders who are requesting the change in performance?
I love the question. Kathy, if you can imagine, the manager in your example says, give me a 3-day training on X. Can you imagine if your manager asks you that and you respond with, well, I could give you a 3-day training, or I could give you something better. I could give you a half-day training and something called a learning cluster so that people will be better supported to change their on-the-job behavior. And I think within 2 months, we'll be able to measure the differences. That's a common way to get managers to do it better. It's very common. Another approach I use is, well, I could give you a training, but I'd prefer to give you a learning cluster. Learning clusters are the new and modern way to deliver learning. And it comes with a set of learning assets. And with those learning assets, all of our learners will be able to learn more and perform better on the job. Now, here's what the manager is thinking. Okay, I'm going to get more for less. I'm going to get something called assets. Finance and accounting folks talk to me about assets. If this group is also talking about assets, that sounds like it's going to pay off a little bit. Sounds good. And hey, this is the latest. I of course want to be on board with the latest, greatest stuff. Sure, I'll try it. So I hope you start to see a little bit how you can get people to get on board with this approach. It's also going to make it easier for you because if instead of being focused on let's deliver a 3-day training, you can now deliver a small part with a lot of things attached to it that can be ramped up over time, and you'll still meet the goal of changing on the job behavior. So thank
Yeah,
you for that question.
yeah, I love it. I've used the term learning asset or environments I've been in. I love it because it does sound like you're creating something with inherent value. That's a wonderful concept. And, the other thing I love about this model is, and I have some of my colleagues here, we've done something like this, but how helpful it would have been to have this concept or this model and this framework defined as such, and then be able to relate to it. I really love that. So I just want to say that about you. And I think that technique works by experience. So I love it, but I wish I had your framework going forward. We do see a question here. I wonder about how you incorporate additional performance improvement factors other than training. It seems like your French example includes some of the performance factors, and a couple other people were interested in that question. So, and I think your example did include it, but would you like to comment on the performance factors plus the training concept?
Sure, absolutely. What I find is that a lot of things that stop learning and development from getting into those other performance factors are the silos within our organization. I was working with Synovus Energy up in Canada and discovered that the knowledge management system was owned by the knowledge management silo, and learning and development couldn't touch it. And so now with this new language, what I should have been able to do is, oh, your knowledge management system is great. Here are my 3 learner personas. This learner persona needs X, Y, Z in your system. This one needs M, N, and O. This one needs something else. I need you, knowledge management silo, to provide this for my learners in this particular subject matter. And if you can't do it, I'd be willing to come in and help, or just dish it off to them to do. So we can get around these silos by saying, hey, this is what my learner needs in order to perform. You guys help me do it. And that way we can get into across all the silos based on what the learners need, not what is happening just in the training classroom. So Max, does that help to answer that question for you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think unless we consider all the performance factors, then we're going to be falling short.
Agreed.
Yeah, and so when you talk about looking at the performance factors and the measurement of that, Lisa, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, but maybe we'd have a moment to elaborate, is how you're measuring, right? I mean, what does the metric look like as opposed to maybe a learning objective? And do you measure the impact of each asset or the acceptance of each asset, or do you measure by cluster and the desired performance improvement?
Well, one of the things that we have in the book is for each action, we have tools. And I'm going to pull out the tool for the change on the job behavior. And what it is comprised of, and of course you can't see this, but you can see that, hey, these are pages filled with lots of blanks that you can fill in with some nice graphics there. But let me talk you through that. When we look at a strategic performance objective, which is the focus of the change on the job behavior action, you have to create this strategic performance objective, which is one level higher than our terminal learning objectives or enabling learning objectives. They all feed into this. And here's the template for the strategic performance objective. By improving X, a skill or a performance gap, for Y, name your target learning group, the business will benefit by, here's where you describe KPIs that will change in the business, typically related to cost, volume, competitiveness, time, and we don't stop there. Strategic Performance Objective, SPO, goes on to say the changes to on-the-job behavior that we will see are, and we get our management to list what things do you expect to actually see different on the floor in the workplace because we've done this. Now, most managers, let's go back to the managers. Hey, that's your job. You go figure it out. And you go to them with your template and you say, but the book says I have to get you to help me fill this out. So what kind of behaviors do you think you might see? And they'll have to sit back and think about it. And you might have to get back to them again. But then they start defining the behaviors that need to change. That's where we focus on. That's why the strategic performance objective works across the board. I had one training program where I asked that, what's going to change as a result of this training that we're going to take all the leaders of the company through on senior executive compensation? What's going to change? And the vice president of executive compensation said, well, what's going to change is they're going to quit calling my phone and asking me how it works again. If that's all I have to do is get them to quit calling the VP, that's a very different approach than having to teach an entire system with math and statistics. I can just get them to stop calling the exec by providing them with some kind of job aid where they can try to figure it out themselves without making a call. So if we can get our leaders, use the template, blame the book, get your leaders to talk with you on these things, then you can start focusing on the job behaviors. I hope that helps.
A great answer. And somebody, I think it was Jean, asked about an LMS called Intrepid that supports clusters of modules to help a learner take them as needed. And I think there might be other LMSs out there that take a more modern approach to this kind of thing that would be very supportive of learning clusters. Have you encountered any that have been helpful to supporting this kind of approach?
I've seen some that are helpful, but I've seen them used in both good and bad ways. Here's the good way. It's all out there in the LMS and people can find it. Yay! Nothing's worse than having put all this stuff out there and no one can find it. Nobody can figure out where it is. Here's how I've seen it used inappropriately. It's the expectation that every learner use every learning asset. No, that's not it. That's not what we want to do. We want to break down our assets into small enough pieces so that people can use what they need to know. Well, do they really know what they need to know? Well, give them a self-assessment and let them figure it out for themselves. What we don't want to do, but we do it all the time, is teaching people what they already know. Why aren't we teaching them just what they don't know? And that's where multiple learning assets in a learning cluster can help. When I was working with Gorilla Glue, one of the things they did, now we typically say that a learning cluster should be comprised of about 10 elements, so that each of the 2 to 5 learner personas gets what they need in social, formal, and immediate areas. But what the Gorilla Glue management said is, we have 50 topics we want you to teach our leadership on. It's like, 50, oh my goodness. So what they did is they took 2 different cuts at their curated materials. They took one cut of, here are the topics, another cut at, how would you like to learn? Then they introduced a program called What Have You Learned Lately? Abbreviated, What Have You Learned Lately? And they send out an email once a week to remind people, what have you learned lately? And suddenly there's a spike in use of the materials online. Now, the how you want to learn, they've got it listed at, oh, do you want to read? Do you want to try something? Do you want to talk to someone about something? Do you want to view something? Do you want to take an assessment or try something? So they've got like 5 different ways. So all these elements are broken up in, how do you want to learn today? In other words, how much time have you got to fit into something? What is your mood for the moment? And they can also go by topic. So they've helped people find the materials. So yes, if we can divvy up the materials smaller and smaller and make them findable, our LMSs can be invaluable for this approach. One of the other things I'm seeing with what I would say is LMS 3.0 is that we're now giving people the opportunity to comment on learning assets. Was this helpful for me? Was this not helpful? Would this be better? This was not good for me, but it might be really good for my neighbor who does XYZ. Let's add some of those comments in there. This adds a social component to help people find out if this learning asset is for somebody like me. Is it trustable? Can I count on it? Should I be using it? How many likes are there? How many not likes are there? This helps us buy on Amazon. Surely it can help us select our learning assets when our learners are ready and need to learn.
Certainly, it sounds like it'd help you ultimately refine your concept of personas too, if you can get that kind of data. Yeah, 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 that's really interesting.
People to help you identify your learner personas. I've found that the people in the training classes themselves, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, asynchronous, synchronous, if we talk to those people who are on the front line with the folks who are actually doing the learning, they can help us identify who are the different personas and what are their differing needs. They're in the classroom, they're the best ones to tell us which people are being taught stuff they already know. And that's a big flag that says, oh yes, I can yank that out into another component for people, other people. So hope that helps.
Yeah, there was a great question, a comment here by Erwin about how does needs analysis change when you want to incorporate learning clusters. And for me, when I look at something like ADDIE, it's kind of a process that gets you through. It's the how, but learning clusters are kind of in another context, we use the phrase design pattern, right? Which is how you craft the solution around the performance or business impact you want to achieve. So for you, what is needs analysis? How does it become different? How does that process become different?
I find that the needs analysis actually occurs if you look at the PowerPoint. The needs analysis starts in the change on the job behavior and the learner to learner differences. Now, as we do that needs analysis, what has to change? What's the strategic performance objective? Who are the learners? How are they different? Now then our design, so I would say that analysis, the needs analysis, tends to happen in change and learn. What happens when we try to develop our SPO is that we might find we think we got it the first time, and as we dig deeper into the program, we find we have to rotate back out and say, oops, our SPO may not be on target because we've learned more. We go back to management and we try again. And we try for a better SPO. That's not going backwards. That's learning more. And this is how the entire process feeds in and on itself. Each of the actions feeding each other and ratcheting each other up as we continue to learn more. So needs analysis, though, tends to be in the change and the learn group with being fed by the track and measures as well. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Erwin, you kind of posed that.
I'm going to say something here. So it seems to me that there's a lot of people who know where the right information is. They are, in a sense, the cluster, or they have access to the resources. Typically, the training departments that are organizing this and even the learners have a much narrower understanding of the issues than if you could throw out a fishing net to people who've done the work or are knowledgeable in the area, and they could help shape what that cluster looks like. So that's kind of what I was thinking about in terms of the needs analysis. It needs to go beyond just the outcomes and really focus on, for people who know, can you build the cluster of the right resources to make available so that people don't go on scavenger hunts without knowing what they're looking for?
Absolutely. One of the things a learning cluster can be done wrong, and I've seen it done by the learning designer sitting there saying, well, I know what needs to change. I know what the learners need. I know which learning assets I'm going to give them to surround them, without any understanding of what the business thinks, what the managers thinks, what the employees think, what the customer thinks, without knowing really how the learners need to learn, without doing their homework. And if people don't do their homework, learning cluster is going to give you a bad result, just like any other model. And I think that's what you may be getting at. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that's close. Yeah. I mean, I think this is more of a systems view of the learning process, and without changing the way you approach entering the system, you're going to get the same kind of result you usually do. It'll just have a nice label on it.
There you go. Which is why we have the tools to try to encourage people to do something different. In the change part, we talk to people about going out and doing interviews, going out and finding out what needs to change, and not just from the manager's perspective. I once had a manager who said that, Lisa, you've got to train all the quality assurance people all across the R&D organization to do this sort of thing because they're not doing it right. And I got to digging into, well, what really has to change, and discovered that the manager didn't know R&D. He only knew manufacturing and was asking for the wrong thing altogether. Well, we stopped right there. And that's going to continue to happen. In our learner to learner differences, we talk about how are you going to prove to yourself that what you're saying about these learner personas is real? How are you going to test your persona to find out how this equates to real people in the workplace? So we try to address that, but it's up to individuals to use it properly. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Well, it's also kind of like Henry Ford's statement that if I had asked the customers what they wanted, they'd ask for faster horses.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Lisa, yeah, I mean, this is such a good conversation because it gets to the point of going through and across silos again, right? Often you're going to have to cast a wider net. Jean had a great suggestion here there too, having some of the learners go back and say, evaluate some things that exist and see if they have been helpful. And if they have not, we wouldn't want to use those, but if they have been helpful, then that might be something effective in your learning cluster. And this could be part of your design process, I think, right? Making sure that you're testing things that you might want to use and part of the cluster if they already exist. So
absolutely. If something exists, please use it. Also, look at the measures. Look at the measures for what's working and what doesn't, and notice the little arrow on track transformation, and it goes back into the surround. Well, we're going to learn from what we measure, and we're going to do more of what works and less of what doesn't.
Ladies, I want to interject here that we're getting really close to the end of our meeting. As they say, time flies when you're having fun. Kathleen, I'm going to let you close out, and then Vincent has a few housekeeping things to address related to 2021. Lisa.
Okay,
One
so Lisa, announce the winner.
We have a book raffle winner. It is Monique St. Paul. Congratulations, Monique. Crystal will be sending you an email on how to get that book. So congratulations and thank you all for playing.
And thank you for offering that, Lisa. And Miller, will you display the slide for Vince just to talk to for a moment?
You bet. Thanks. Okay, let's go look at our programs. There we go.
This means I get to talk about everyone who's here, right?
So we wanted to let people know about some of the upcoming programs. We'll give you
Right.
we'll come back to Lisa just for a moment at the end. But we wanted Vince to just let you know what's going on with our upcoming programs. This was so wonderful.
First of all, thank you very much, Lisa, on behalf of everyone, and Kathleen. In the old show business, they always talk tough act to follow. So this is a tough act to follow. What I'd like to let you know, if you look at the screen in front of you, look at the lower right. There's a couple of really interesting ISPI SoCal meetings coming up this Friday on the 4th. One, DE&I series, Patty Beach, Connecting Performance Improvement Diversity series, and the other one, a roundtable meeting earlier in the morning. We invite you to attend either of those. They're also free. We have some of our recent programs there in blue above that on the lower right. And you can see our basic 3 themes of our meetings are our challenge webinars, like the one you're seeing right now, our DE&I, we call them fireside chats. And that's the best way to describe them. I urge you to experience one. And the other one are Friday morning roundtable meetings, which is a specific format, the roundtable, where you will be participating proactively. What I might let you know is because of the COVID disruption of our lives, we've made all our meetings in 2020 free for everyone. We urge you to attend those, no catches, anything like that. For 2021, at some point, we have to pay for Wild Apricot. We have to pay for Zoom. We have all these little things that we have to do. So membership fees will come back. 6 months of our meetings are for $20, a full year, $40. And if you want to go to any individual meeting, it's $10. If you have any questions, email me. We just wanted to let you know we're going to change that next year because we somewhere people want money from us and we have to do that. The main thing we like is this is really a community of practice. Someone once described ISPI as the Directors Guild. We're not the Actors Guild. It's the Directors Guild. People who think what's going to happen and like to plan and make it happen. Lisa and Kathleen, let me return it back to you.
So, and I just wanted to be very clear about the membership. That is $20 for 6 months or $40 for an entire year. All of these meetings are included within that membership. The $10 is not an additional thing. It's like
Right.
if for some strange reason you only wanted to attend one meeting, because your best friend was on or something, that's only a one-off. But you go to $20 and you get all of this stuff for included. So I just want to be crystal clear about that.
Sure.
Lisa, I wanted to thank you so much. This has been just a stellar concept, really useful and awesome. I will reiterate that she is making the slides available. We will be posting the video on our YouTube playlist. Just search ISPI SoCal. You should be able to find it. And just any final thoughts, Lisa?
Wishing you all happy holidays, and I hope that you will help us evolve the model even further by sharing back with us on LinkedIn or email your stories of success with the Learning Cluster Design Model. Good luck.
Lisa, this has been fun. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody. Thanks for all the great comments and questions. And I guess that's it for this time. So everybody, we're going to close the meeting now. Thank you. I hope everybody has a great end of 2020 and even better 2021. Thank you.
See you all on Friday.
See you all on Friday.
Two great meetings on Friday to choose from.